Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and before we get into today's topic, I do want to remind you that if you have benefited from this podcast, then please give this a like and subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment. It's been kind of fun engaging with some of you on YouTube. And also, please give this podcast a 5-star rating and a review on Apple, on Spotify, or wherever it is that you are listening to this. And one last thing, this kind of ties into what we are going to be talking about today. I am planning for next month, since it is Valentine's Day, next month is Valentine's Day. That's good English. But next month is February, which does contain Valentine's Day. I swear, my brain is here and it's working. And with that in mind, I am going to be devoting next month strictly to talking about dynamics of purity culture. Because whether you grew up in the Christian tradition or not, like I did, there is a good chance that you have been influenced by Christian purity culture. And for a lot of people, that has had damaging ramifications. And with that in mind, if this is something that you have struggled with, then I would love to have a conversation with you. It's a part of my story. I have had many conversations with clients about the impacts of purity culture and just trying to recover from that. You can get in touch with me, set up a free hour-long call to see if we'll be a good fit for each other. And I look forward to talking with you soon. Now it's for our topic today, which if you saw the title or the thumbnail and you're like, what do you mean by replace the water in air? This is something that really struck a chord with me when I was listening to a couple of podcasts just earlier this week. And what was shared was this dynamic of, again, going back to purity culture, there are so many things in our lives that were just a part of the air that we breathed, or they were a part of the water that we treaded or that we swam in. And a big part of the work that we do, in fact, this is probably one of the most important things for us to do, is replace the air and the water that we find ourselves surrounded in. This is something where skepticism can be very helpful. This is where I am going to go back to the analogy that my partner Libby used when I interviewed her that I just love, that when we are in the middle of all of these, say, turmoil, struggles, whatever it is, that it can seem like that's all that there is. And we can focus so much of our time and attention on whatever is causing anxiety, whatever is causing fear, depression, sadness, anger. And Libby had this great way of describing it of, we are in a snow globe, and sometimes what we have to do is we have to step outside the blizzard in the snow globe, and it's not like we're getting ourselves out of the situation, but it gives us a more objective view. We are not in the storm, we are observing the storm. And that is looking at our situations with compassion and curiosity, and, as I've already shared, skepticism. Are the thoughts that I have around this particular situation, are they true? Where are they coming from? I think about what I used to believe. I think about what I grew up with. Again, this was the air that I breathed. This was the water that I swam in for decades. And these were telling me that people who are homosexual are blights on society. I do not believe that anymore. If I did not get out of the messaging and the teachings that I was just inundated with, I would still be there, because we don't know oftentimes the influences that are being made upon us until we step out of them. And sometimes we can be forced out of the situation, out of the mindsets and the teachings, and sometimes we can step out of them ourselves. I often am reminded of something that I'm pretty certain it was my friend Dan. It might have been my friend John. But we were having a conversation about the Pride Month of June. I think this was 2 Junes ago now. We were having this conversation. And we were having a discussion of how all of these people that have so much hatred around people using their right to speak and express themselves and be who they are, and they were being vilified for it. There were so many people who were almost in abject terror about the displays of love and commitment and affection. And it was just within this year, actually, June of 2025, that I actually attended my first Pride rally. It was a very wholesome place to be. It was one of the most accepting places that I have ever been in. And I will also admit, because of my upbringing and because I am still spreading my wings in this area of being an ally, there were some things that made me a little uncomfortable. Now, I wasn't afraid of what was going on, but I had to recognize that discomfort. What was making me feel uncomfortable? Oh, I was breathing in some of that old air that was telling me that these people are wrong. And watching some men dress in drag and put on a show, it's not something that I am familiar with. It's not something that I was ever told was an okay thing to partake in, to participate in. And some of those old feelings came back up. And while we were having this conversation, I remember Dan or John making a point of, whenever you hear people complaining about Pride Month, just be grateful and tell them to be grateful that they don't need to have a month. I am reminded of when I was a young kid. Oh man, I remember we were celebrating like Mother's Day or Father's Day, or maybe it was even like a Grandparents' Day or something like that. And I asked the question of, why isn't there a Kids Day? Why isn't there a day that celebrates us kids? And I don't know. I was probably 6 or 7 or something at the time. I honestly don't remember how old I was. And I remember the sage advice that I got from my parents, and that was because every other day is Kids Day. The days where we are not celebrating something are the days when kids are oftentimes just playing and living life, and you don't need to have a special day for kids because every day seems to be special for them. Or at least that's my hope. It is my sincerest hope. And I know that there are some kids that is not the life that they are leading. That is not what they are experiencing. And it's so sad when you think about it. Tangent aside, one of the things that I've had to remind myself a lot whenever some of these old thoughts come into my mind is something that my friend Mike McCarg had shared on his Ask Science Mike podcast when he was explaining, hey, how do we engage with these people that have these critical and even harsh views about other people that we don't necessarily agree with? And he posed the question of using the example of individuals who are homosexual. He said, you can always ask the person, what do your gay friends think of that? And I can tell you, as someone who grew up in the Christian church, I didn't have any gay friends. All of the information that I was receiving about the nature of being homosexual came from people who hated homosexuals. It was the air that I breathed. It wasn't until I replaced that I really started to notice, oh, these people that I was told were evil are some of the most loving and committed and compassionate people that I've ever met. As I was thinking about this topic, I was reminded that there was a time when, if I was posed that question, legitimately posed with the question of, well, what would my gay friends say? I would have had no gay friends to ask. That has changed now. I have two very good and close friends who are homosexual. There are communities that I'm a part of online that have LGBTQ people. I have interviewed some queer individuals on this podcast, and I'm not done interviewing these people. The air that I am breathing and the water that I am swimming in is not the same as what it used to be. And personally, I couldn't be more grateful for that. I really couldn't. Just the thought of going back to such bigoted and misogynistic and patriarchal beliefs, and just that world where everything was black and white. It was a zero-sum game. There was so many restrictions on what you could watch, what you could read, what you could listen to, who you could even be around. Go back to my podcast where I talk about what is authoritarianism. A lot of these same things. I cannot see myself going back to that. And I feel like I am such a stronger and more well-rounded person because of these influences. Because I have chosen to get out of the old stale air or the murky, muddy water that I was told was crystal clear. And I am surrounding myself with something different. I am surrounding myself with different answers to my questions, different perspectives. And for some people, this is something that is very scary. It is scary to take the step in order to change the air and the water that surrounds us. And it can also be very scary for people who don't want you to leave where you are. I really struggled with stepping away from a Christian community that I used to be a part of, an online Christian community, an online Christian recovery community, if we continue to just get more granular with what this community was all about. And the reason why is because as my faith changed, as my faith was deconstructed, and I started to reconstruct a very different foundation, I was afraid of the judgment that I could receive and the loss of friendships, because I was going to miss out on sometimes weekly interactions with people that I'd grown to love. And I sat in that water and I breathed in that air until it burned, until it was unbearable, until the fear that I would be found out as a poser or a hypocrite or even as a non-believer, that became too much. And it wasn't until I finally stepped away that I recognized, oh, I should have left sooner. And it was okay for me to do so. I can be so much freer. I am so much freer. I can speak for myself instead of trying to filter out in the hopes that someone would hear what I was saying and report me to others. I don't know. I had a lot of irrational fears around that. In the end, it can be very helpful to have an outside perspective, whether you are taking that outside perspective or you have someone else who is that outside perspective, to ask them, hey, does this seem normal? Oh, the number of times I have talked with clients and they're sharing something that is truly painful about their history and their past and interactions that they've had with family members, with friends, co-workers, with peers, with faith leaders. And they're like, this is just how it was. That's just how that community was. That's how they treated me. That's how they treated others. And I have had the privilege of looking at them and say, that's not right. It may have been your normal, but just because it was your normal doesn't mean that it was right. And I was able to offer an outside perspective. I was able to take them out of the stagnant air that they were breathing in and be able to give them a fresh, new perspective. And it challenged some of their beliefs. Now, what they do with that, that's entirely up to them. I was just there to pose the questions. I was there to create this safe space for them to be able to talk about whatever was on their heart and their mind. And if this is something that you are aware is taking place in your life or is a part of your history, then please be gracious with yourself and be compassionate for who you used to be. Again, we do not know what we do not know. We cannot take the us as we are today and look back on the us back then and judge ourselves. That's not helpful. We are constantly doing the best that we can with the knowledge and life experience that we have. We cannot get out of the water that we are swimming in if we don't even realize that it's shark infested, that there are people around us who are trying to pull us under, that we are told something is crystal clear and absolutely black and white until we actually get out of that water, until we can find the exit, find the escape, find someone who can lift us out and see where we were and see where we could be. We cannot change if we don't change what we are breathing in, what we are taking in on a daily and weekly basis. And this is one of the things where I have to be super careful. I think a great example of this is my episode on what is authoritarianism. The audio version didn't get a whole lot of traffic. Oh, but the video version has like the highest amount of views of any video I've ever produced. And according to the YouTube algorithm, I should produce more of that kind of content. And I know that that's not where I need to stay. I cannot take in over and over, day after day, week after week, just the garbage of what is going on in society today. Yes, I try and do my best to be informed. And I also have to recognize that sometimes the new air that I'm taking in isn't healthy either. And it's good to know where that healthy air is that we can breathe in, where that healthy water is that we can swim in, and almost like it cleans us. It cleans us on the inside, it cleans us on the outside, and it helps us to better engage with the people who are still in the muck and the mire. If you need a fresh perspective on life, on society, on something that you're struggling with, I would love to help you out with that. And I'm not the only one who is willing to do that. There are many people out there who you can just ask questions to and can receive some honest answers. In fact, if you have questions about any of this, feel free to send them to me. The email is questions.btcpod@gmail.com. You can find that in the description. And I am happy to either just answer them via email or share them. Share my answers in a future podcast. A great analogy for this, now that I think about it, is something that happened, I think, just this last week. I think it was before Halloween. And Libby and I, we woke up one morning, and I woke up and it was like any other morning. And as my alarm was going off and I get up and start to get ready to head into the bathroom and start preparing for the day, Libby rolls over and says, "The room either smells like skunk or Odin pooped in his bed." And I'm like, I'm not smelling anything. Grab my phone, use the flashlight feature to look around at Odin's crate, and no, nothing there. And Libby's like, okay, it smells. And I'm like, I don't know what you're smelling. I didn't say that, but I definitely had that thought. It's like, I don't know what you're smelling. I'm not smelling it. When I take Odin out for his morning constitutional and I step back inside, oh, could I smell it? Ho, 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 was there the smell of skunk that just permeated the house. Why? Why couldn't I smell it before? Because that was the air I was breathing in. I didn't know really how bad it stunk because I was sleeping and dreaming for all of this time that it was permeating our house. It wasn't until I stepped outside and got relatively fresh air that I stepped back inside the house and I was able to say, yup, it smells like skunk in here. And it was too cold to open the house because autumn. And that's what our lives can be like. You might be walking around in a life where you're smelling something as pungent as a skunk or raw sewage. Or maybe, man, every single time I drive by our city's waste disposal center, oh, does that have a unique sour smell to it. And I get the feeling that the people who work at that facility, I bet they hardly notice it these days because that's what they breathe in. And that's what life is like. That's what my life was like. I can almost guarantee that's what your life was like or has been like. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can change that. Hopefully you found this inspiring. Hopefully it helped you to step outside of the snow globe that you are in order to take an outside observation of the influences that you have externally and internally. And as I promised at the beginning of this, next month we are going to be talking all about purity culture. So I hope that that's a topic that interests you. Regardless, it's still a great one to return to, and it's a great one to dive deeper into than just the one episode I've done already. So I will talk with you again next week, and until then, live strong for today.